Hello dear watchers, dear listeners. Welcome to the first episode of another series of the Double Dorje podcast. Now as it happens, I'm going away in for a few days, so I have no idea when the next episode will come out, but I did want to get started on this one. It's actually an easy one for me to do because most of the script has already been written by somebody else and I'm basically going to read it out. Let me give you the background. I first got involved in Tibetan Buddhism in the 1970s. Now my home centre, as I suppose we might call it, in those days was what is now known as Marpa House, although at the beginning it was called Kam Tibetan House, named after the area in East Tibet where the main teachers there, Lama Chimi, came from, but they changed the name partly because people thought it sounded like Calm Tibetan House. They thought it was a peaceful meditation centre. Well, perhaps it was in some ways, but that wasn't the point. Anyway, for geographical reasons, I was also strongly connected with a small centre that came into being just slightly later in Birmingham. I lived near Birmingham, I'm from Birmingham, and this was the obvious place to connect to. It was a Kaju centre, strongly connected itself to Samueling in Scotland. There is a bit of a history there about how there was a tiny centre. They were the West Midlands Buddhist Centre, and at some point this name became transferred to the new place, which was initially a joint centre for Theravada Buddhists and for Tibetan Buddhists. In due course it was found that there wasn't that much interaction between the two sides. Some people came on one day to do one thing, others came on another day to do another, and there is a story that the main reason why the Tibetan part got another house just slightly further down the road was because of the smell of the fish sauce that the Theravada monks were rather partial to. Well, that's just a story, I don't know whether it's true. Anyway, the centre acquired, so to speak, two Tibetan teachers, or a pair of them. They were called them Lama Tuktum and Lama Lodro, although Lama Lodro, who this is about, was very unassuming and would say that he shouldn't be called Lama Lodro because he hadn't done the necessary 3-year retreat. Anyway, he was much respected, he was quiet, very unassuming, very helpful, very friendly, and unfortunately died quite recently. Well, I say unfortunately. As we shall see, he was 100 years old and he'd led a very good life. Now, Simon Roma, who has held the tiller at that centre for many years, wrote this piece, which I'm now going to start reading as a sort of eulogy, I suppose, yes, to Lama Lodro. Here we go. Actually, Simon starts by mentioning that the 12th Kenting Tai Situpa Emadunyo, who was Lama Lodro's root Lama, encourages us to make our lives a masterpiece. Lama Lodro's life was such a masterpiece. Here are some glimpses of it, combined with some of his own advice. First bit of advice. As a foundation, it is essential to understand cause and effect. 100 years ago, by Lama Lodro's own calculations, he was born in the Derge region of Kham in East Tibet. His village was a handful of remote houses on a mountain. His family were barley farmers. With a long-standing connection to the Palpong monastic seat of the Kenting Tai Situs, the young boy joined the monastery when he was around 8 years old. There wasn't any particular sponsorship for monks at the time. They would spend most of the year at the monastery and then return to their homes to help with the harvest and the animals. The farmer monks would swap tsampa for the butter and meat of the nomads. This was the land of yetis in the vegetable patch and animated corpses clomping around in purpose-built zombie houses. Lama Lodro's students would later be spellbound as they heard tales of how to avoid a yeti's strike and how to disable a zombie by cutting its birthmark. I don't know about that, but anyway, that's what it says. If you know where to look on Google Earth, it is possible to still see the zigzag path that Lama Lodro made on a local mountain and the goat trail where, in his early teens, he faced off with a leopard armed only with a penknife. With a fearlessness that lasted his whole life, he even sabotaged his father's rifle to prevent him hunting. Next bit of advice: don't leave the island of jewels with empty hands. The young monks would sit in deep snow memorizing their texts, the snow revealing their shuffling to the criticisms of the circling prefects. The monks would go to sleep, checking their memories for the next day's examinations. In case of a forgotten word, they would get up and check the pages by the light of the glow of a piece of charcoal. Lama Lodro was tutored by his uncle. When this uncle died, Lama Lodro vowed to adopt any insect that might live on the bodies of his fellow monks, putting them inside his own shirt, a kindness which he believed prevented him being later troubled by bedbugs when living in India. Anybody want to try that trick? He became expert in the monastic arts, in the ritual instruments of the oboe, the long horn and the short horn, the jaling, the radung and the kangling. He not only could play the instruments, but he knew by heart all of the sacred revealed melodies that are played on them. He was an exquisite master of the bamboo flute. The only occasion I ever sensed his regret was when he told the story of discovering his broken flute trampled by cattle after it had fallen from his backpack. He was an expert in the Palpung Torma making tradition. When requested to bless Lama Lodro's Mahakala Tormas at Kamalnaro, and which are now with Lama Rapsang in Palpung, Wales, the Thai Sitapa said they were already blessed as they were made so perfectly. Lama Lodro was an umze, that is a chant leader, and knew many rare ritual tunes and the percussion instruments of the chant leader. He was also a proponent of cham, the sacred movements emanating from the Sambhogakaya, something for you to look up if you don't know the word. Specifically, he danced the role of the stag, the spectacular athletic character in the New Year masked dances. That's something that you can find relatively easily on YouTube if you look around. Lama Lodro didn't merely learn these monastic arts, he perfectly inherited their traditions. He was a treasury of knowledge, and every expression of this knowledge was without the slightest error or lazy excuse. He was still pointing out improvements I could make 6 months before his death. Selected by the retreat master Lama took to Namjal, Lama Lodro became part of a team supporting a number of 3-year retreat centers affiliated with Palpung Monastery. This was to put him in an excellent position to train aspiring 3-year retreatants in Europe, as he knew exactly what they needed to know. The 1950s brought terror to Tibet as the invasion came from the east. Following a 3,000-kilometer walk to Lhasa and back, there was no road or rail travel in those days. Lama Lodro's party left over the mountains on foot to escape the deadly persecution. Walking in deep snow for months, away from established pathways where they might be shot, the Lamas ended up in the jungle area of India known as Nagaland, where they stayed for 2.5 years, barely surviving by eating the dust left by termites in the forest and cultivating wild chilies. Not my idea of a great diet, but there you go. They used large leaves to avoid getting soaked as their clothes disintegrated. They never even heard the word tea for the whole time they were there, let alone actually being able to drink a cup of it. Not knowing if any of their fellows had survived in Tibet, the Lamas were eventually flown by military plane to India itself, where they settled in the northeast in Darjeeling, close to the Gyalwa and the young reincarnation of Thai Sitapa. The Lamas lived at the 18th century monastery of Buttabutsi for some years, before being sent to the center in Copenhagen by the 16th Karmapa. Europe was not entirely welcoming to refugees in those days, and the Lamas were shunted from country to country until, in 1979, a kind and faithful immigration official in Dover allowed them into England despite the irregularities with their documents. So that was 1979, I'd forgotten that date. Eventually settling here in Birmingham, Lama Tupton lived for 10 years until his death in 1989. Lama Lodro was with us for 47 years. His flight as a refugee finally ending in the 1990s when he received British citizenship. He had been without a homeland for nearly 40 years. Next bit of advice: don't just listen to and like Dharma, you must accomplish Dharma. Accomplish Dharma not for your own benefit, but for the benefit of every living being throughout limitless space. Through the lens of the 6 perfections, we can see how Lama Lodro embodied this instruction. Regarding generosity, or jinpa, Lama Lodro never chased personal possessions, wealth or fame. He admonished us never to make Dharma into a business. Whatever clothing or money came to him, he gave it away. He was generous with his time, I know that from personal experience, seeing his friends and students even within a week of his death. He was generous with Dharma, teaching individuals when they asked and training long-term students every single day for years on end. Never once did he ask anything in return. He taught that the more people are in a room, the less they will benefit, and accordingly he gave more time to individuals at the expense of his own free time. Regarding the ethics, tsultrim, of keeping vows, Lama Lodro kept the vows of a monk for 92 years, and those of a bhikshu, that's a full monk, for about 80 years. Regarding the ethics of doing good, he engaged in countless virtuous activities. He commissioned and proofread texts. He prepared and filled statues perfectly without cutting the slightest corner. Every syllable he wrote was perfect. He saw each letter of the Tibetan alphabet as the presence of a Buddha. He did many prostrations every day, well into his 90s. I'm well into my 70s and I'm not doing very many of those now. Regarding the ethics of benefiting others, he blessed and named babies and animals. He performed marriages and funerals. He blessed houses. He performed exorcisms. He transferred the consciousness of many deceased and followed up with excellent care for them, undertaking 49 days of prayers for many and ensuring that their names were also sent to the great masters of Tibetan India. He gave life advice and meditation instructions, many of us receiving refuge vows, reading transmissions and Genyan vows from him. He spent many months helping to prepare retreatants in the ritual arts at Samyeling in Scotland. His traumas also graced the shrine there. For decades he performed the annual Naga offerings as well as other specialized rituals at Carman Narrow in Wales. Regarding forbearance, zupa, Lama Lodro never displayed irritation or anger in the 40 years I knew him. Although he felt pain, he didn't display discomfort until the final few days of his life, and even then he avoided painkillers in order to keep his mind clear. Regarding enthusiasm, Tsundru, Lama Lodro applied himself joyfully and without regret to everything he did, whether formally practicing Dharma, gardening, repairing the roof, or making useful things out of wood or cement. He was never lazy and never wasted time, and yet he was joyful and took pleasure in life too. Regarding meditation, Samten, he engaged in formal practice for many hours every day. He rarely spoke before the afternoon. He had a 4-inch stack of texts which he read without fail. Even when engaged in a full course of Dharma study, he could be heard reciting his daily prayers in the breaks. The rest of his time was informal practice, whether going for his long daily walks, watching Tibetan folk dancing, or even watching wrestling and boxing. The Mani mantra was always on his lips. It's difficult to see the extent of contemplation and cultivation in someone else's mind, but Lama Lodro never stopped acquiring the sherab of listening, attending every session of his guru's teaching just 6 weeks before he died, and reading commentaries and teachings even closer to the end until he no longer had the strength to lift the book. As his life neared its end, Lama Lodro's advice became increasingly clear. Have no doubt about Dharma. Have confidence in cause and effect, the three jewels and enlightenment. Recite Om Mani Padme Hum for all mother sentient beings, combining the words with their meaning. Practice Dagnang, that is pure appearances, and finally, regularly dedicate the merit of your virtue to all beings. Milarepa teaches us that the merit of the supporter of the yogi is equal to that of the yogi. With that in mind, we remember Dr. Laird, who supported Lama Lodro's death, and especially Tsering Chödön, who supported his life. Without them, Lama Lodro would not have lived so long and so healthily. And we also bear in mind Lama Rabsang, who has so selflessly supported Lama Lodro after his death for the past 49 days. And so, as we say farewell to Lama Lodro's body, let us dedicate the merit of his truly excellent life to all our mother sentient beings. Through this merit, may the lives and activities of the genuine Lamas increase, so that all living beings purify obscurations, gather the accumulations, achieve the level and manifest the qualities and activities of Buddha, of Dejin Shepa. Well, that's the end of Simon's text. I noticed one piece of context that wasn't in here was that at the age of 100, Lama Lodro had travelled to India to take teachings from Taisitupa. It was only there that he first started to experience symptoms of the cancer, and when he returned to England, I gather it was only a few weeks before he then passed on. He lived a full life. May we all aspire to at least partially live such a good one. Bye.